Okay, hello everyone. Good morning all. I'm Haline Rocha and I'm really happy to be here. I feel honored to be part of this event. I'm a little bit of an outsider coming from Brazil, South America. I'm here way more to learn than to share some novelty, but probably the study case in Brazil will be interesting. We have a different scenario regarding CCS and this is what I'll share with you today. So I will just introduce myself a little bit. I am a geologist. I just became a professor at the University of São Paulo in Brazil. It's the second largest university that we have in South America. We have more than 90,000 students over there. And CCS in Brazil is expanding just like here in Europe, but in a different scenario I'll share with you. Okay, so my presentation will be more of a general overview about the CCS status in Brazil. It's not going to be very technical. I do conduct research on cap rocks and CO2 interacting with the reservoirs, but here I'll give a general perspective regarding CO2 geological projects that we have in Brazil and the regulatory scenario. So first, as we know, CCS is entering a phase of expansion, driven by more robust policies, greater private sector engagement, and expansion of global infrastructure. So we now have several countries that included CCS in their national carbon management plan. Although CCS is expanding way more in North America and Europe, there's also some progress in other countries, including the Global South. So actually CCS has been going on in Brazil since 2008. We do have a large oil exploration in Brazil in the offshore. It's called the Brazilian pre-salt. Probably many people heard about it. So in the Brazilian pre-salt, we do have a high content of CO2 in the reservoirs. So around 20%. It's okay? Okay. So there is a high content of CO2 in the reservoirs in the Brazilian pre-salt. So Petrobras, which is the national oil company in Brazil, has been reinjecting the CO2 for enhanced oil recovery. This has been going on since 2008, so the company already has knowledge and expertise about this technology. So far, CCS in Brazil has been happening in the Brazilian offshore and associated with enhanced oil recovery. Okay, but I will share about the energy mix and the energy scenario in Brazil. So as we know, Brazil has a lot of renewable energy. So in comparison to other countries, for example, we do have 50% of renewable energy sources in our total energy supply. It mostly comes from hydropower, but we do have an important share of biofuels and solar and wind. So Brazil actually stands out as a clean energy mix, with a clean energy mix. However, the scenario is about to change because we cannot expand more of hydraulic generation in energy generation due to environmental reasons. So it's more likely that we're going to have an expansion of thermal power generation based on natural gas, and also the oil production in Brazil is likely to increase. So there is a relevance for CCS technology. I also like to mention that the CO2 emissions in Brazil, it goes for a different scenario that we have in other places around the world. So, for example, worldwide, most of the CO2 emissions are associated with the energy sector. However, in Brazil, most of the CO2 emissions are associated with what we call land use and deforestation. So this is associated with the agriculture expansion and many other factors that happen over there. So 70% of our emissions come from these sources, the deforestation problem. Around 20% comes from the energy sector. So just to share more about the Brazilian energy sector. So historically, Brazil has this important contribution for renewable energy, mostly hydropower, but then an important share of solar and wind has been increasing recently. Brazil is investing a lot on renewable energy sources. So, of course, we are a huge country. We have more than 200,000 million people, and the energy demand is increasing. And so we are worried about the energy security in Brazil. And the plan in the government is to expand the thermal power generation. So that's where CCS can also play a role. And like I mentioned, bioenergy is quite big in Brazil, it's quite relevant, and there is an opportunity for combining bioenergy with CCS, the called BECCS projects. So these are also happening and expanding in Brazil. I would also like to share that Brazil is a very relevant oil producer. Actually, in 2024, we were the eighth position in the rank for oil production. So Brazil is an important oil producer and is also aiming to expand. So here I'm showing the sedimentary basins that we have in Brazil. Most of our oil production is in the offshore. Oops. Most of our oil production is in the offshore. The Brazilian pre-salt is in the Espírito Santo and Campos and Santos sedimentary basins. But Petrobras is aiming to expand the oil exploration to what we call the equatorial margin. So, following the example in Guyana, I probably heard about the oil boom production over there. Of course, each reservoir is unique, but it's very likely that we have a big potential in our northern coast in Brazil. We still have studies being conducted, the exploration site, but there are a big perspective that we're going to expand our oil production significantly. So we are looking at how we can compensate emissions, and also CCS will have an important role to maintain this sustainable growth of the oil industry in Brazil. So this is being recommended by the government. So we need to do CCS in order to continue oil exploration in Brazil. So most of our production comes from the pre-salt, comes from the offshore, of course, and in comparatively, the oil in Brazil would have a lower carbon intensity because of the CCS and also because of the quality of the oil, the API. So Brazil actually produces a light oil, and it's a business opportunity for the country to sell this low carbon intensity oil. So this is to share like the kind of, so this is exploration wells. Like I said, mostly on the offshore. We have some exploration on the Brazilian onshore as well, but this is where we get the information from to calculate the country and the local sedimentary basin storage capacity. So what I'm going to share here is a research conducted from the Brazilian energy company, EPE, the energy company part of the government. So they have partnerships with us in the University of São Paulo, and we are trying to rank the sedimentary basins that would be more favorable for CO2 geological storage. So what we did at first is to map where would be the CO2 emission sources and see where we would have closer reservoirs to the sink, closer sinks to the CO2 emission. Like I mentioned, in the offshore, it's the focus of our expansion, but we have a very large sedimentary basin that is called the Paraná Basin. Here is the most industrialized region in Brazil. So actually is where we have most of the CO2 emission sources really close to potential reservoirs, which increases the feasibility of this kind of project. So we are doing research on how we can inject CO2 in the onshore as well. So this is to share some of the results that we have. So we are mapping the kind of, it's important to mention that Brazil also have a very large amount of the hard-to-abate industries. So we have a very strong steel production, cement, paper and pulp is also quite big in Brazil. So we are mapping this industry, trying to calculate what would be the demand, what would be the CO2 emissions, and the reservoirs that we can use. So this is the methodology. So in this case, we are excluding the CCUS, so we are excluding the Petrobras reinjection of CO2 from the offshore reservoirs, and we're looking for other opportunities in the onshore or even in the offshore, but not associated with oil production. So we are trying to develop these studies and see where would be most favorable to conduct pilot projects. So there are already some projects in Brazil of CCS. There is a project in Rio de Janeiro. This one is onshore. It captures the CO2 from a thermal generation, a natural gas thermal generation in the region of Cabiúnas, Rio de Janeiro. And there is a new project that is called São Tomé, CCS. It's going to be a pilot project also in Rio de Janeiro. It's where we concentrate our oil industry. So we already have some projects that's beside the one that we have in the offshore. In the campo of Libra or Lula is where we do the CO2 EOR project. There is another one that is interesting because it's a small company, a private company in the Brazilian central region associated with biogenic CO2 from ethanol production. The project is called Lucas do Rio Verde. So this one is a BECS project, so it's associated with ethanol production, and the biogenic CO2 will be stored in a saline aquifer. So this is interesting because Brazil sees BECS as a big opportunity. We are a major producer of biofuels, so we do have a lot of the biogenic CO2, and it would be interesting to have negative emissions and potentially carbon credits in this scenario. So actually Petrobras has this aim to provide CO2 injection as a service and to decarbonize other industries that we have in the Brazilian onshore, the hard-to-abate industries. So, but as you can see, Brazil is a really big country, so this kind of studies, they need to be regionalized. So in this study, it's segmented according to the Brazilian region. Of course, in the southeast of Brazil is where we have most of the potential for implementing CCS technologies. Again, I'm not talking about the CO2 EOR in this case, but in the southeast of Brazil, we have more incentives for this kind of projects in a state level, and we also have the proximity for the CO2 emission sources and potential reservoirs. So in this region, we have saline aquifers, we have natural gas fields onshore, and we also have basaltic formations, very big basaltic formations from the central to the south of Brazil. So there are some research going in this direction in this region. So this is to share. Some of the studies are focused on BECS, so for this opportunity for removing carbon dioxide. I'm just going to share a little bit of the methodology. So we are still in the very beginning stage for calculating storage capacity. We also lack information of saline aquifers. I think that's the case everywhere. But in this region, for example, we have more of an infrastructure that could be favorable to this kind of projects. So this is probably where CCS will take over in the country. And to finish, I'll share about some legal and regulatory updates that we have in Brazil. So even though we've been doing CCS since 2008, we still don't have a clear regulation, but it is developing. So in 2024, there was a law in Brazil that incentivizes the production of biofuels and also the mix of biofuels into liquid fossil fuels. So for example, in Brazil, in the gasoline, you need to mix with 30% of ethanol in the mix, and the same is going on with diesel. So these public policies are incentivizing biofuels production in Brazil. So This is interesting, and also in 2024, in this law, they mentioned CCS as an important way to decarbonize the hard-to-abate industries, and also as an opportunity to be combined with bioenergy and generating negative emissions. So we are developing also a carbon market. This is also very recent, but the goal is that it's going to be, the regulatory market will be implemented in 2027. And in 2029, it's going to include all the hard-to-abate sectors in Brazil. So we're going to start with steel, cement, and then we're going to also include the other industries that we have there. But we are still in the very initial stage, but developing in a slower pace. We already mentioned BECS as strategic to Brazil. And regarding the carbon markets, so in Brazil we have a policy for the transport sector, like I mentioned, this mix of biofuels in liquid fuels, in diesel and ethanol in gasoline. This has been a good case study for us because it also incentivizes biofuel production and reduces CO2 emissions. So this has been the baseline for us to develop the regulation. It is called Brazilian Biofuel Policy, RenovaBio. I don't know if you heard about it, maybe people that work in the regulation. So RenovaBio already emitted certificates for the production of biofuels. And the CBIOs are the initial credits that we are developing there. So this is just to share the stage that we have. We're not starting from zero. We're starting from this biofuel policy and carbon credits. So just to finish, what else we need? Of course, we need to improve research and quantify what is the CO2 geological storage capacity in Brazil. We still don't have a lot of data on this. We also are going to consider other kind of geologies like unconventional reservoirs. As I mentioned, we do have a lot of basaltic formations in Brazil. There is academic research going on potential for mineralization. We also have the organic rich rocks that have some potential. In the south of Brazil, we have coal deposits. They are being investigated for CO2 absorption and a solution in a local scale. So there's a lot of work to do. And yes, I think that's it. Thanks.